Hi, Nick.
Hello, Sherry Joe.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's interesting. Right before I hit go live, you said, this is my first podcast.
This is my first podcast.
I'm so glad that we can have this experience.
Yeah, me too.
This is great. I'm really looking forward to talking with you. We've had so many good conversations over the last few months, just talking about leadership topics and being a good member of your family. And we've had some really deep conversation, and I really appreciate that about you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I think you're going to make a perfectly good podcast guest because of that. I'm going to do a quick introduction of who you are.
Okay.
And then I have some questions for you about the blind side.
Let's get into it.
Okay. So Nicholas Hazlett has been in law enforcement a very long time, and he's a frontline leader in law enforcement. So he has this privilege of being like a tip of the spear kind of guy, but also a supervisor, leader, mentor, coach kind of guy. And I really think that is a fun combination for you to bring to Sworn Impact as an instructor. And this topic is one that you wanted to talk about, and that's the blind side.
Yeah.
What is it in a nutshell? What is the blind side in a really quick nutshell?
The blind side steps into how a confirmation bias happens in our daily world, but specifically in law enforcement.
And you were sharing a story with me, and I was like, wait, the podcast guests need to hear this. So confirmation bias and the blind side for law enforcement, you have a really practical story. You're a DRE instructor, and that is a drug recognition expert. And you do the things like roadside sobriety tests. You do those all the time, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's a big part of your job in law enforcement. So can you talk about the roadside sobriety test you were doing with one of your students?
Yeah, he was one of my students a couple of years ago. Now he's my shift partner. Ironically, I just before we started this, I got a phone call from him, and it's both of our day off, and he's just calling to say hi. So it's a young man that I've been mentoring for several years now, even from the time that he started as a student. But now I get the privilege of working with him. The story, and this kind of will set the stage to go into the topic. I stopped a vehicle, it was about a year ago, maybe a little bit less, on a guy. And as soon as I got up to the car, odor gives us clues when it comes to substances being used. Most substances don't have an odor at all, but some are more smelly than others, like marijuana has a very distinct smell. When someone's been drinking alcohol, we don't smell alcohol at all. We smell the beverage. We smell the things that make the beverage what it is. So those odors kind of give us a clue as to, or a cue, I should say, as to what it is they've been consuming. So my partner comes to back me up after I first talked with this guy, and I looked right at him and I was like, dude, this is cannabis all day. And in the drug recognition expert world, all the substances that people consume to be impaired, be it legal or illegal, fall within 7 drug categories. We have everything from central nervous system depressants, which are prescriptions, alcohol, we have central nervous system stimulants, inhalants, narcotic analgesics, dissociative anesthetics, and then we have cannabis at the very end, and hallucinogens. Can't forget those because that's a new topic today as well in recent change in our state. Yep. So the car, I was like, right away, I was like, this is a cannabis case all day long.
But as a DRE, you know that there are 7 drug categories, but you were like open and shut, this is cannabis.
In my mind, just by the odor alone, and that's what I told my partner, was this is cannabis. And I'm going to go a little bit further. So he asked me, he goes, hey, can I do the drug recognition influence evaluation on the guy if he agrees? And I said, absolutely. Now, what I had done right there, just by sharing with my partner, was one, I was already stepping into a confirmation bias, and we'll get into what that is here very briefly. And then I just put him in the very same category that I did to myself. I just gave him the category that this would probably be. And then I did it to myself as well. So now there's two of us.
So you had your own confirmation bias, and then you projected that onto someone else.
I did.
Yeah.
It's a dangerous place. It's a dangerous thing to do. And as soon as it happened, I recognized it too. So I stepped into the roadside sobriety test with the driver, with the subject. And as soon as I started evaluating his eyes, I see something entirely different, something that cannabis doesn't usually present. And as soon as I saw it, that's where my brain really went, you were thinking this was cannabis only. So I didn't say anything else to my partner, and he's a newer DRE, a newer drug recognition expert. And every couple of years, as we have to do our recertifications, one of his evals has to be observed by an instructor. So as his supervisor, but also as his instructor, I got the chance to be in the evaluation with him. So he goes through he begins the 12-step process that all the DREs do. It's very systematic and standardized. So we'll do it the very same way. And as soon as I saw him evaluate the eyes, and I didn't say anything else, as soon as I saw him evaluate the eyes, he's up there doing what we would do. And as soon as he did that, I saw his head kind of like tilt as he carries on. And he's like, because he was looking at evidence that wasn't consistent with what we thought it was going to be as well.
Yeah. He realized it then as well.
Yes.
Maybe this isn't what we thought.
And while our topic today isn't specifically about polydrug use, because the polydrug is two or more drugs, polycategory is two or more categories. That's a whole topic in and of itself. But we know that when people likely abuse substances, they often abuse other substances with it. And he ended up calling two categories on this guy. And it was confirmed by toxicology that the guy was on a central nervous system depressant and cannabis, and he called them both accurately. Now, in hindsight, in looking back at it, knowing in the moment that I had a confirmation bias from the very beginning just because of the odor of the cannabis, and then I gave that confirmation bias to my partner, that is so very dangerous because of how powerful the confirmation bias is. So I kind of want to define what a confirmation bias is, but kind of talk about bias first. We talk about biases in our society and in our culture, in our profession all the time. So a bias is an inclination of temperament or of outlook. It's a way of looking at things. And like I've told you before, Sherry Jo, I'm the father of two daughters. I have the best kids on the planet. But you have kids too.
Yeah, mine are the best kids on the planet.
Mine are the best on the planet, which means that I have a bias that I have the best kids. So do you. We all do. That right there, just in and of itself, is a very easy way to understand bias, right? My parents are the best parents. I am the best parent. Well, I'm the only parents that these kids have ever had. And that's what I tell them all the time. I'll tell my oldest, you're the best firstborn daughter I've ever had. Dad jokes all day. Dad, I'm your only firstborn daughter. I'm like, yeah, but I get to exclusively say that with them. So we have biases. Some of them are good. Some of them are very healthy biases. Some of them are not. And then as we talk about the vast array of biases that exist out there, confirmation bias is just one of them. And then within confirmation bias, there's different ways that it can apply to us. Sometimes they're conscious biases, and sometimes they're unconscious confirmation biases. So confirmation bias is where you don't seek out any other objective facts. It can influence investigations. And we have to look at things objectively. Every investigation, we have to come into it objectively. Once we start with the confirmation bias, we're no longer objective, and that's where a danger can happen. Mentally, in our recall, we can only remember details that uphold those beliefs of what we think the outcome should be, unless we recognize the confirmation bias.
That's really hard.
It is.
That's really hard to check yourself in the moment we've talked about it in the roadside sense, but it also can apply, like you're talking about, more of a broad investigatory sense where you really have to go in so open-minded.
Yep.
Tell me this, because you've done more research on this than I have. Can past experiences feed into your own confirmation bias? Like,
Absolutely.
I've seen this happen before. I know what's going to happen. I've seen it before.
Yeah. Think about it from the story shared with my shift partner, right? I've done a lot of drug influence evaluations on cannabis where it was just cannabis. And that's why that odor alone can be a danger of putting your brain saying, well, I'm only going to see the things that cannabis should show. But confirmation bias also aids in ignoring information that challenges what you believe the situation to be, the outcome, and that's the dangerous part. So we have to be aware that this can happen to any one of us.
I like that you call it the blind side, because it gives an edge to it, and really makes you realize that you can have blinders on. And, when talking about there's an edge to it, talk a little bit about officer safety.
Sure. Anybody that started off in the career of law enforcement, we all go to academies. We all talk about officer safety, and officer safety is a huge topic. We, at the end of the day, at the end of the shift, we just want to go home, and we want to go home safe. If we're on our way home and we make that one stop, and all we want to do is just get home, so I'm just going to make the stop, I'll take the enforcement action that I need to, and that's all I'm going to look into it. I'm going to stop the what, as opposed to investigating the why. What happens then is we can let somebody go down the road that probably shouldn't be driving, or if we quickly deem, oh, this person's not a threat, whether it's a vehicle contact, whether it's a pedestrian contact, an investigation at a residence, whatever it is, gosh, I just want to be out of here. If that in itself can be a bias. It can be a confirmation bias that I'm just going to do what I have to do here and look no further. We can miss a gun in the car. We could miss subtle psychological or physiological signs that the subject's about to turn it and become violent. If we're focused on the end because we already know the end of this, or I want to get home, or I don't like this type of interaction, so I'm not going to look into it any further, we're allowing a dangerous thing to continue or go down the road.
Yeah. I'm really excited. So you're coming to the December 9th de-escalation class in Nashville.
Yeah.
I'm really excited for you to see that curriculum firsthand, because a lot of what is presented is about bias and how bias can either keep us safe, because it is a brain tool that helps us group pieces of information together, can either keep people safe on the road, or can lead to things like cognitive bias and the blind side, where you put yourself in danger. I'm really excited. That's a little bit of a tangent, but hearing this, I think you're really going to love the curriculum on bias as it relates to de-escalation when you see that next month.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to being a part of that. And really, if this is the first time someone's ever heard confirmation bias, whether it's in that training coming up here in December in Tennessee, or if you're listening to this podcast and it's the first time that you're ever hearing confirmation bias and you're going, what is that? Look into it.
Yeah.
It can keep us safe. These type of biases prevents us from looking at things objectively. And it spans the gamut. It's not just in law enforcement and investigations. It affects our world all over. It can happen with the things we believe in, faith. It can happen in politics. We only want to listen to one thing and not be objective and take all the information in. Confirmation bias puts us in a mental headspace of only approaching things that reinforce what we believe. So gathering all the facts, how we overcome the confirmation bias is getting other perspective, is looking at your partner and saying, hey, you saw what I saw, and we can look at things differently. It's like And if you and I were in the same room in the same investigation, I'd look at you and say, Sherry Joe, did you see what I saw? What do you think about that?
Let me see if I can do this.
Can we do this?
I did see what you saw.
You did? Okay, well, what did you see?
We're still doing it.
What did you see that I didn't see?
Right.
Because I have a blind side sometimes. It's a blind spot. And if we can use each other, if we can use our shift partner, not give it to our shift partner,
Sure.
but ask those better questions. What did I miss? Because I don't want to miss anything. I don't want to miss the gun that can kill me, the subtle psychological change in somebody. Because we're human beings. We're fallible and we have weaknesses. We also have strengths too. But sometimes your strength is going to be different than my strength. And that's where I want to shore up my partner, not bring him down and give him that confirmation bias, like the example that I gave you.
I really like that you are giving a very practical tip right now for people in the policing profession, people in law enforcement, to use the people around you to look for your blind side. I really like that.
I think it's important that, like I have with my one of my other frontline leaders that I work with, I've given him, and I also supervise him too, but I've given him explicit license to expose my blind spots.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, dude, I need you. We need our partnerships, right? I need you to tell me what I can't see. Whether it's in leadership, whether it's in supervision, whether it's in an investigation, we need each other. We can't do this job alone. We can't do most jobs alone unless we just want to do it the one way, our own way. But we're not built to be an island. We're designed as human beings to be in community with each other, in relationship. And it can happen in relationship too. And I think that's one of the things that makes healthy marriages or long-standing relationships with your family is just give them permission to speak into your life and expose the things that you can't see.
I think this is, think about this, Nick, like the impact you could be having right now. There might be someone listening to this podcast right now who's headed into an afternoon or like a swings or a night shift briefing. And maybe this spurs on a topic of conversation for briefing and helps an entire team of people.
I would love that.
On the job tonight. I just think that is such a cool way to spread the message of the blind side.
And if that's the case, if you're listening to this podcast and something changes tonight on shift and you want to throw it in the comments and let us know, hey, this is how this topic affected my team tonight. This is what happened. I wouldn't have looked at this the same way, or I just thought about something that I've never thought about. And now I'm realizing that I do this to myself all the time.
Yeah, I love it. It's really practical for this afternoon, but it's also practical on the Sworn Impact company side.
Yeah.
This is a really great topic for you to bring. I've seen you present keynote addresses at banquets. I've seen you present keynote addresses at conferences. And I think this is a wonderful standalone topic, even though I know you weave it into your workshop and your longer form training. I just think that that's a really cool opportunity. It's a great opportunity selfishly at Sworn Impact for us to pitch you as a keynote speaker because it means a lot to you. You can tell it's personal.
It is personal. I think back to an event that happened in February of last year where I was nearly killed on the job. And it happened because of a confirmation bias of one of my teammates who had stopped a driver that was driving dangerously, and he stopped the what, and he didn't investigate into the why. 10 minutes later, he came over a hill crest, passing traffic on a shoulder. I was just over the other end of that hill crest. He was going over 100 miles an hour, and I saw it coming just last second. And I went to throw my truck into the ditch at the time, and went to throw my truck in the ditch at the time to get away from it. But by the time that I would have been able to get away, it would have been too late. But last second, he just dove back into the lane. If it wasn't feet, it was inches. And I aired the stop and the location, the plate, and something I've never said over the radio in 17 years, and said, this guy almost killed me. And I got up there and the guy was visibly impaired, and I saw the open containers in the vehicle. And as I asked for his information, my dispatch center said that he had just been stopped.
Oh my goodness.
10 minutes before. When I asked him for his license, he handed me the ticket from 10 minutes before. And I had a conversation with my teammate about that later, the one that had stopped him. And he wanted to hand me his badge that night. And I told him no. Absolutely.
No, what a huge learning lesson. What a huge opportunity to be the best on your next shift.
And he did just that. He dove into training. He had the heart to do it. We put him back into some more advanced impaired driving training, and he went out on his next shift and removed several. And it was amazing. But that's the danger with the confirmation bias, is if we're only stopping the what and we're missing the details that, well, I'm only stopping you for the speed or for passing people on the shoulder. We're missing the impairment, and somebody can get killed. Unfortunately, we've had, just in my recent recollection in our state alone, we just lost a Boulder officer to an impaired driver just recently.
Yeah, Golden as well.
Sorry, not Golden.
Yeah.
We just had we had a state trooper out of Colorado Springs hit by an impaired driver. We lost 2 CDOT workers over on the Western Slope by an impaired driver this year. It happens all the time. We cannot afford to miss it. We just can't. We have to be objective. Look at all the facts in front of you. Don't just stop the what, but investigate everything. Investigate the why.
Thank you very much for sharing that last
Absolutely.
story, especially. And thank you for what you're doing on the job as a frontline leader. Thank you
Absolutely. You're worth it. You're why we do it.
Yeah.
Everybody out there listening to this, that's why we're in law. It's not even just law enforcement. Law enforcement is only one aspect of our job. We're in the profession of policing, and we do that for our communities. We do that for the people around us. So you're worth it, and thank you.
I like that you called for comments. So we'll be watching the comments over the next several days on this podcast. And I'll share those with you, Nick, if I get any that just come to me about how teams are using this, maybe in a briefing or like in a coaching session. And then I'll put contact information up here as well for Sworn Impact, like our general email inbox, and then your email directly in case people want to talk to you further about this topic or bringing you in to speak or do a workshop.
That'd be great. I look forward to it.
Okay. Thank you for spending your time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on today.
Yep. Bye, Nick.
All right. Stay safe, everyone.